Hello, everyone. Welcome to Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Hannah Zuberi. You're watching us on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim-focused TV channel. You can watch Muslim Network TV 24/7 on Galaxy 19, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Today, we'll be discussing a topic that has set Muslims around the globe into a tizzy. Vice released an article yesterday about a Muslim prayer app with over 98 million downloads, and its claims is one of the apps that's connected to a wide-ranging supply chain that sends ordinary Muslims' personal data to brokers, contractors, and the US military. The article says that the US military is buying granular movement data of people around the world, harvested from apps that we use every day on our phones and on our laptops. This research was done by Motherboard. The most popular amongst these apps is a prayer app that many of us may have on our phones today called Muslim Pro. It's a prayer and Quran app, really well done, and many of us use it. There are other apps as well that they found also are selling their data, including a Muslim app that sets up people on dates for marriages, a popular Craigslist app, an app that follows storms, and a leveling app, and I'm sure my husband uses that a lot, that can be used to level shelves in a bedroom or put up your pictures, on your walls. So why does the US military need this information? Why does it gather it? And according to the Vice article, the military relies on a company called Babel Street, which creates a product called Locate X. So US Special Operations Commands, a branch of the military tasked with, guess what? Counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and special recon, has bought access to Locate X to assist overseas special forces operation. The other stream through which a company also can sell data is called X Mode, which obtains location data based directly from these apps. And that's what the Vice article was about. And then it sells that data to contractors and by extension, the military. Now, Muslim Pro has released an article today, a statement today, saying that they did not know that they were selling this data to the US military. And there's been a lot of discussion online whether that's even, how did they not know, whose responsibility it is, ethics, all of that. What is particularly egregious to me is the assertion that religious Muslims who pray regularly, who care enough to carry around the Quran on their phone, to check the timings for the 5 daily prayers on a daily basis, are the ones who are being targeted and linked to terror. This is another one of those countering violent extremism memes that it's just like a meme come to life. So to discuss this and much more, our guests today are Sue Audrey and Robert McCow. And we're hoping Robert will be with us in a few minutes. And we're just testing out his sound. But let me introduce you to Sue. Sue her career in public service spans 4 decades and includes advocating for peace, civil rights, and economic justice. She's an experienced nonprofit administrator and an expert on issues relating to the intersection of national security, human rights, and civil society. As executive director of Defending Rights and Dissent, Sue leads the organization's advocacy and public education efforts. Thank you so much, Sue, for being with us here today as we try to make sense of this news that was heard today. You've worked on anti-war and peace and justice work for decades. What are your thoughts about the US military buying location data from these apps?
So many thoughts, Henna. So many thoughts. The first immediate thing is this is going directly against our Fourth Amendment rights to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. It's going against our First Amendment rights because, as you said, Muslims just practicing their First Amendment right to engage in, to follow their religion and have religious freedom are being targeted by the U.S. military. But then the second thought is, we've seen this record over and over and over again with the U.S. military spying on people based on, again, just their First Amendment practices, whether it's religion or political dissent. So we've seen it from the military. We've seen this certainly from the FBI. We've seen this from the CIA. So it's like, no surprise, but just the tools that are available now for these sectors of our government are so much more powerful. And we've let it happen, and so it is really scary.
So a lot of the laws of the country, are they up to date with how quickly tech is advancing?
Yeah, they're not. And, the Congress, no, they're not up to date. There's a couple of, if we want to get into legislation, there are some efforts. Activists are really pushing Congress and state legislatures to wrap their heads around this massive explosion of surveillance of our everyday activities, to try to at least put a firewall between that, private data collection and the government, which there isn't. The government can access this data so easily.
And this is so eerily, like, I was just watching the documentary on Edward Snowden the other day, and a part of it, you feel like it's over, and you're lulled in this false sense of that, WhatsApp is encrypted, and Facebook is, not sharing our data with anybody else except for advertisers. But as we look into some of what this research that Motherboard has done, is that you find that some of these are being sold to, so for example, they say that some companies obtain app location data through something called bidstream data, which is information gathered from real-time bidding that occurs when advertisers pay to insert their adverts into people's browsing sessions. And so firms often acquire the data from software development kits. So it's all kind of mashed in together. It's not just advertisers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard, since the Snowden revelations, when we found out that our government was collecting the telephone calls of every single person in the United States, right? Every single person. And there, two things happen. One is that people say, well, if I don't have anything to hide, it doesn't matter if the government sees it. And then the second is kind of this overwhelming sense of, oh my God, there's just so much. How are we gonna stop the spigot of information that goes to government? Because there's just so much, and we really need to fight both those, perfectly sensible feelings that people have.
So, so we have Robert on. Thank you so much, Robert, for being here today. Let me introduce our guest, Robert Mikhail. He's the Government Affairs Department Director at the Council of American Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. Since 2011, he's overseen CAIR's Muslim civic engagement and empowerment programs that brings the American Muslim community concerns to Congress, the White House, and federal and state agencies. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, Sue. Good to see you all again.
Good to see you. So, Robert, are you surprised with this revelation by Vice yesterday, the article that dropped on Muslim Pro? This is your daily job, working on government relations with CAIR.
Yeah, sadly, it's not too surprising because, as maybe Sue already said earlier, we've seen that Customs and Border Protection has been buying private database information so that they can track immigrants inside the United States without a warrant. It really seems that this is a new government mode of operation where they are buying private data that, 20 years ago would not have been available, was never conceived by the Constitution, and they can end run needing the essential need to have a warrant for this type of information. So now we have a list of Muslims who are American citizens that use Muslim Pro. I'm one of them. It's on my work cell. Yay, the government is once again looking at a CARE cell phone number. And we are being monitored in some way. Now, again, they're saying, just like with the NSA, when they would intercept foreign data, that they're separating out American profiles, but I really don't accept it. The NSA's own standard, when they were writing it, they said they were 51% accurate, that all the information they were gathering was foreign, not domestic. I've always never trusted that number, kind of pulled out of the hat. This is an insult. American Muslims for years have been under government surveillance. We find ourselves in one more government database, whether they're targeting us or not. For years, the American government has been carrying out drone strikes overseas in Muslim majority countries. They have taken the lives of countless citizens. Again, we find that they're now using a religious application used by American Muslims and Muslims worldwide to target the movements of Muslims for potential drone strikes, or even watch listing or other attributes. Because you have to remember, the military is on the watch list advisory boards. It's much bigger than the military.
Exactly. It is much bigger than the military. And Robert, CARE has issued a community advisory specifically. Yes, last night I saw it on several WhatsApp groups. Can you tell us more about this community advisory?
Absolutely. So we're calling on every concerned citizen, just not Muslims, but every American citizen concerned with this potential violation of our civil liberties to text, use our action alert, which you can find on our main page of the CARE website. Take action, send a message to your member of Congress and say, we need a congressional inquiry. We need a hearing on this. This is as big as a break as any other NSA story that they held hearings on. There should be no double standards for the Muslim community, and Congress should be taking action. Senator Ron Wyden already commented on this, senator from Oregon. He's upset about it. I saw Representative Ilhan Omar tweeted about it last night. I'm sure if I check, the other Muslim reps have already made statements, but it has to go beyond that. We really need House and Senate Judiciary Committees, House and Senate Military Committees to be looking at this. And hopefully by tonight, inshallah, we're going to be sending a congressional-wide letter reiterating that statement, and we'll be pushing for this in the coming weeks.
So in a recent interview with CNN, X-Mode CEO Joshua Anton said that the company tracks 25 million devices outside the United States every month and 40 million elsewhere, including European Union, Latin America, and the Asian Pacific region. So X-Mode has previously told Motherboard that its kit is embedded in around 400 apps. So this can be anybody. This is not limited to the Muslim community, but specifically since this news has come out, and apps that we're talking about are praying apps, and for example, another app is Muslim Mingle, which has been downloaded more than 100,000 times. So it's almost like, for Muslims specifically, it's like, get them where they love, get them where they pray. Is there any space where we are free to be ourselves? Sue, I'd like to get your comment on that, and then Robert.
That's a really good question, Henna, and I think it's really important to both acknowledge that this surveillance is happening and that it does specifically target Muslims. It impacts, really, I would say, almost everyone worldwide, but there's always, for the past 20 years, and actually since the first Iraq War, there's always a tilt towards really focusing in on the Muslim community and members of the Muslim community. So we have to recognize that, but we also need to not. We need to recognize it and fight it, but we can't let it impact our daily lives, right? We need to continue to practice. People need to continue to practice their faith. They need to continue to speak out against injustice and against war that, again, also seems to really target members of the Muslim community worldwide. So while we need to recognize it and fight it, we can't let it silence us.
Robert.
I mean, going back to the 1960s, the NSA was carrying out Project Minaret, where they were targeting civil rights leaders, whether it was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. They were all being targeted by the NSA domestically, but this was a larger, more global surveillance program. So Muslim leadership, civil rights leadership have always been targeted by NSA-type surveillance. This is just an extension to the national security complex. We right now are seeing that the U.S. military is targeting in on just general civilians that are using these apps, trying to get all the metadata, see where it crosses at different data points. I am not as upset with Muslim Pro for not knowing that a third-party contractor was selling the data to another third-party contractor that the U.S. military was using by proxy. This is the new digital world that we live in. I had questions last night. Well, who should I trust for this type of service or information? And I was saying your local mosque calendar. It's on paper. I think anytime we enter into a digital space, whether you're Muslim or not, you're giving something away, and you have to be more savvy with the times and understand where is my data going and how could it be used. And it's really hard reading these terms of service and agreement, and it's upsetting that Muslim Mingle might not have even had disclosed this information on their terms of service. But I think we should always be suspect of any of the apps we're using and what type of data is being shared. Are we safe in our own private environments, at the mosque, in our MSA, in our student groups? No. We've seen mosque crawlers. We've seen the NYPD infiltrate MSAs. We've had people come into our communities and try to entrap our youth. I think that the rule of thumb is that we just need to be practical and smart no matter where we go. Hopefully your home is a very safe, happy place. But when you are in the outside world, you should always keep your wits up.
Exactly. Even I remember there was a case in New York where one of the infiltrators acted like a best friend and became a bridesmaid at a young woman MSA member's bridal party. And later it was discovered that she was an informant and had been hired by the FBI. So this is something that the Muslim community definitely should be, it shouldn't have surprised many of us that are in this realm, but I feel like a lot of people do blame Muslim Pro as a I believe they think it's owned by a Muslim organization or a company. It's a Muslim-run company, which there's some talk on the net that perhaps the founder may not be Muslim. And some app developers, even to Muslim board, motherboard, they said that they were not aware who their users' location data ends up with. And even if a user examines a privacy policy, they may not ultimately realize how many different industries, companies, or government agencies are buying some of their most sensitive data. So yes, what you said, Robert, definitely rings close to my heart. What about you, Sue? What are your thoughts? And any advice? You've been doing this for so long, and how do we protect our organizing in this time where so much is done on using the same phones as some of these apps are on?
Yeah, it's a tricky question that we're all trying to deal with, right? So when you sign up for an app, if it's free, the way that they are paying for what they're doing is by selling your data. And so we all need to recognize that. And so you want to limit the apps that you sign up for. And you can look at the privacy policies, and pretty much all of them are selling your data. So you want to try to, maybe you're a little more protected if you purchase an app that promises not to sell your data. I don't even know if there are any of those around, though. But I think what we need to do with this is consider this yet another call to action. And I really appreciate that CARE got people mobilized so quickly last night. I think that's really essential. I think that we can get laws passed that would prevent government agencies from really circumventing the Fourth Amendment by just buying our data instead of trying to get a search warrant. And Senator Wyden is about to introduce a bill that would do just that. So I think this is maybe good timing, and we can get that bill passed.
Well, do share that from our end on Justice for All. This is something definitely that we would be interested in. For myself, like I want to bring, and this is what I've been prepping, is to bring this up on the religious roundtable that we sit on every week, and we talk about very sometimes condescendingly about egregious assault of religious freedoms across the world. And there are egregious assault to religious freedoms around the world, but it's happening in the United States as well. And so to bring this up with Ambassador Brownback, that what is he doing about religious freedom right here in his country, where our country's laws are being broken? So that is something that we're working on. And if you all would like to sign on to that, that would be something that we can send your way. This is an article that just went up on Muslim Matters, where it shows that, just as you were talking about, both of you, that this is an environment that we live in, and there are practical things that we can do that would stop our data from being accessed by the organized, by Muslim Pro or any other app developer. So some of their things are just turn off your location accuracy on your phones unless you're using it for GPS or something like that. There's no need for your location to be on. So there are other things. We'll share the link to this article where people can learn how to, do things on their phones that can help stop their data leakage. Robert, there was also a community advisory where CARE suggested that Muslim Pro should be deleted from your phones. And the Muslim Pro today released a statement, and they've said that they weren't aware. They didn't think that Xmode would be selling the data. They didn't do further analysis, actually, and many people are calling them out for it. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on should Muslim Pro should they be the only one? Why aren't people calling out Craigslist in the same manner as they're calling out Muslim Pro?
Yeah, so last night, CARE, in our press release, we clearly stated that people should not be using Muslim Pro until we hear back from Muslim Pro. They did make a statement where they said they'll no longer be distributing this data. That's no longer. It did go out previously. It's now a matter of trust. Do you trust Muslim Pro to make good on their word that in the future they will not be selling it in any other way? I didn't see that statement. I would like a more clear statement. They said for the time being they're not selling and that they're investigating. So I would advise people to wait for the investigation, keep the pressure up on the company, and have them issue clear policies where for just a fraction of the money that they've earned from creating this app by selling the data, that they find alternate revenue streams. That said, Craigslist, I think that's a great case in point. We should keep up the pressure there too. That is how we're going to get buy-in from the larger American community. A lot of Americans use Craigslist. I'm sure there are more apps that we're not aware of that are likewise getting their information scraped by Customs and Border Protection, the military, the next, three-letter acronym agency that will pop up in the coming weeks or months when we find out they did it too. We need to keep the pressure up. So I really do encourage all Americans. This isn't a Muslim issue. This is an American issue. If we were upset about the Snowden disclosures, then you should be upset about this as well.
Definitely. One of the things that is concerning to me is also the United States at least has the Fourth Amendment. There are many countries in the world that don't. And these app tech companies do carry ethical and responsibility to not sell this data, because there are governments who will buy this, and especially genocidal regimes like Burma, like China, like India. This data in their hands, God knows what would happen. Sue, please comment.
Absolutely. And that's the frustrating thing is, we can pass a law in the US Congress that will protect people in the United States, not just American citizens, but anybody in the United States. But that doesn't protect anybody outside of our borders. So I hear you, and I think the only thing that can work there is is public pressure on these different apps to be good global citizens and to protect their data. And you're absolutely right, especially against genocidal regimes that can use it far, even more treacherously than the U.S. military, if that's possible.
Possible, exactly. Those drone strikes resemble a lot of what other regimes are doing. So, when a lot of times we look at, so I did want to talk about, if, for example, I am a user of Muslim Pro, do I have any legal options? What can I do as a citizen of this country? Can I file a legal case against someone?
I'm not an attorney, so I would just say that CARE attorneys are looking at all the options right now, but we haven't come to a conclusion yet.
Okay. And Sue, in your experience?
Yes, so that's another problem, and hope maybe the CARE attorneys will find something that can help us. But if Muslim Pro didn't violate their terms of service agreement, then I'm not sure what users can do, because none of us look at that, and most of them say that they retain the right to do whatever the heck they want with your data.
And while it is ethically, I think, wrong to source, prayer information to the U.S. military, even if it's by third parties, I'm more concerned about the government's ability to scrape this data. And I think, Senator Wyden is on point, and he needs our support, where we need to reform U.S. civil rights law to protect Americans' digital information. And that includes stopping the government from end running the Constitution by just buying private data that it would otherwise not be legally allowed to attain. I think that, it's a legal stretch. It's definitely an ethical breach. And again, the government should not be maintaining a list of Americans in databases, even if, stored away, just because they can. It's not right.
So for both of you, right now we're under a Trump administration. Do you see anything going to, if Biden comes into power in January, do you think there will be any changes, or will it become easier or harder?
I think it remains to be seen. I think that Democratic administrations, under the Obama administration, the watch list was run effectively to target Muslims. That CBE was launched to target Muslims. We also hear from the Biden camp that they're willing to talk, listen, and work on these issues, but the promises haven't been 100% solid. So it more looks like we have a party on the other side willing to discuss these issues, but no firm promise yet on how we'll address them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the thing that could make our task harder is if people sit back and say, oh, Biden's going to take care of it, because he's not. And even if he wanted to, he's still up against a Senate that's not going to be necessarily sympathetic to protecting people's privacy rights. And even in the House, Nancy Pelosi has not proved herself to be a a privacy hawk and a warrior for our civil liberties. That's not what she is.
But this is an executive function, so technically we could lobby on this for a number of years and maybe get a good executive order banning agencies from scraping information. But it would be very hard to believe that the federal government would ever stop collecting the information of foreigners. They might just carve out domestic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's being realistic.
So we understand Senator Ron Wyden is a champion, and we're going to show the statement that he's made, taken. But who are some of the other champions that are there? Because people need to know. People need to know, especially people who are a lot of times we don't know ourselves. Are one of our senators maybe somebody that could be pushed on this or could take this further if they hear from their constituents. So between the two of you, can you name anybody else in the House or Senate that could be that their constituency could push?
I'll take the easy ones, Robert. So right off the top in the House, we've got 4 women who y'all might have heard of. The squad is good on these issues. Representative Omar is fantastic, and she's knowledgeable, and she gets it. She understands it. I think outside of those 4 in the House, I think also Representative Lofgren has taken a lot of strong stands to protect our privacy. And that's what I've got for the House. I think in the Senate, far and away, Senator Wyden is our strongest champion. I think there's some other members of the Judiciary Committee. Senator Leahy from Vermont is pretty good on these issues. What would you say, Robert? Since I took the easy one.
I really think Adam Kinzinger has made some good statements about the watch list in the past. I think that even Benny Thompson, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, has recently taken some interest in the watch list. And so I think we could push this issue somewhat in the House. I think Representative Judy Chu would be great on this issue. I think Representative Jayapal would be great on this issue, in addition to the representative Sue mentioned. In the Senate, I really have not seen too many blockbuster civil rights champions. It's been tough, I have to admit. Senator Cardin might be interested in this, but it would remain to be seen and reached out to on this. So I think there's interest there, but we're going to have to work on it.
What about Massachusetts Senator Merkley or even Markey?
Yeah, you know what? Markey should have been mentioned. Markey is a good ally to the Muslim community. I'd like to see where he would stand. I'm sure his office would be interested in hearing from their Massachusetts residents. If you are in Massachusetts and you've seen CARES Action Alert, take action. We'll be following up with Markey.
This is, and honestly, for all of us, for me, what really fascinates me is the lack of, like, for example, Europe has been on the cutting edge of this with privacy policies and how protection. What is missing? Why is the larger American community, just the Americans in general, why isn't this taken more seriously?
I would love to jump in and just say that Americans provide corporations way too much leeway. We have an idea of let the free market sort things out, but the free market is not interested usually in the civil rights of Americans, but more making a profit. And so really, it's just American culture that we believe that the government should not intrude on our private lives, but we give a free hand to the private organizations. And so in Europe, they really do believe, though, that their rights extend to how private corporations treat their private information. And if there wasn't a legal right to do so, there's an ethical right, and they built a regulatory framework to protect European citizens that just Americans lack. And really, it will become we need a cultural shift in America where we say it's not right that my location and all my metadata is up for sale, and that, you know, China is able to buy profiles of Americans and build their own database of U.S. citizens just because American companies are eager to sell it.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think that's absolutely true, and that actually reminds me that another ally in the Senate would be Senator Sanders, who, before his presidential campaign took off, was really hot on the idea of holding corporations accountable for what they do with our data. So I think what Robert said, you know, kind of we've let corporations bribe us. It's like, if you give me this app for free, then I'm not going to look too close. But then the other thing, honestly, is the fear mongering that, you know, certainly Trump took it up to 11, but it's not like Biden. That's not like President Biden is gonna step back from any fear mongering, and the war on terror 20 years later is still going on, and it still provides for the ability for the government to seize all these authoritarian powers that they haven't let go of, and Americans are just crazy scared people. Whenever you give us a foreign threat, and we'll go off the deep end and give up so much of our rights.
You know, when a lot of times when you're having these discussions, one of the things that we hear often is, I don't have anything to hide. Big deal, they're looking at me. Even some of the memes that we see on, that's one thing I have to say, the Muslim community has a great sense of humor. So lots of chuckles on Muslim Twitter. But that's one of the things that we hear often is, I don't have anything to hide. Big deal if they're watching me. Check out what time I need to pray Fajr. What do you say to that, Robert?
You know, we've seen in the past the FBI use trainings where they look at the religiosity of Muslims, and that included, do they go to their mosque for morning prayer? We've seen at the border, and this is the subject of a CARE lawsuit, where border officials in the past have asked, do you pray in the morning at the masjid? And who is your prayer leader? Maybe they're going to get a tea visit from the FBI. I think that this information is really important, and it really, all the little things we do on the online, what we consider our digital private life, is very public, and that it paints a picture of who we are. And when the FBI is allowed to do racial mapping in any community based on ethnicity, and that's a carve out of the DOJ's racial profiling guidelines, it matters. It matters very much. And even if I had nothing to hide, I never remembered giving the permission that I'm ready to be sold.
They're ready to be sold. Sue.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's not just our privacy. It's really it breaks down when the government can invade our privacy. It really breaks down our efforts to create community, right? Because you don't want to help the government invade somebody else's privacy, right? If they're tracking your phone, you don't want to get your friends in trouble. And so I think, we, especially for Muslims, the way that our government targets Muslims, and as Robert said, if they think you're praying too much, that's a problem. And of course, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to hide how often you're praying. And it's not just the government, maybe targeting you in a sting operation, but we know that the FBI is wildly aggressive in targeting Muslims to become informants themselves, right? And using really high pressure tactics to try to coerce people into becoming informants and tell them what's going on in their mosque. So I think it's really dangerous, especially for a community like the Muslim community, to have an attitude that I have nothing to hide, because really know what the government is looking at and what they're looking for. So we just need to tell them, no, my life is not an open book to you.
Seriously.
Sometimes the government has stopped travelers coming to the U.S. based on not even what they said, but a random Facebook friend said on their feed. Not even on their page, but on their feed, the scroll of every comment made on Facebook by someone you know. It's not just who you are, but it's who you know and how they're grouping us together.
So, Robert, do you have any idea? There's a Senate hearing going on right now by big tech, Dorsey from Twitter and Zuckerberg from Facebook, the CEO. They're appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee to defend their company's approaches to moderate speech on their platforms. Do you know at all if any of this is going to be brought up today, or have you heard anything of that, either one of you?
I haven't heard anything either way, but that doesn't mean that this can't become a part of the agenda of things that need to be asked during these hearings. And again, take part in CARE's action alert. That's care.com actually. And, message your member of Congress and let them know that this needs to start getting on the agenda. And I promise CARE works a lot with Sue and, defending dissent. And this is going to become part of the bigger the bigger civil rights agenda when it comes to online and digital privacy and security.
Sue?
Well, I think to kind of piggyback off that, for the number of different issues that Robert and I have trekked up to Capitol Hill to talk about, is for people to understand, and I think we've kind of alluded to this throughout this conversation, is that this really is just the tip of the iceberg in just the myriad ways that our government surveils us in general and Muslims in particular. We talked a little bit about Countering Violent Extremism program, which is just a massive, kid gloves approach to surveillance, where they pretend they're there to help you, but they're not. The Patriot Act is still in full force. We did manage to sunset one of the surveillance provisions earlier this year, but it's still there. FBI informants all over the place. Really, any activist who has anything to do with Palestine is also being targeted. So I think it's just the tip of the iceberg of government surveillance, and then it's also the tip of the iceberg of data collection and the way that tech is spying on us. So, with facial recognition software that the private companies and the government can take have a picture of a crowd and find you in that crowd. And if that crowd happens to be a protest that they don't like, or, whatever. So I think there's so much work to do. And I guess Robert will be joining each other on Zoom, meeting with members of congressional staff to kind of light a fire under them.
Certainly, and especially for me, when I watch Steve Bannon get away with saying, Fauci should be beheaded, and yet he is not targeted. His Facebook account or Twitter handle has not been deleted. The disparity between two scenarios, where there is a Muslim just looking at his phone and trying to get married or trying to go pray, versus white supremacists openly calling for the beheading of a U.S. government official, and yet nothing being done about it. In fact, the Senate hearing is concerned about how Republicans are being targeted or conservatives are being targeted. This is something that is particularly, I want us to be surprised. I want us to be infuriated by this. Sometimes we get too jaded, and it just keeps on happening. So, thank you so much. As we're winding down the hour, I want to give the floor to both of you.
I'm Cortana, and I'm here to help.
to just at least share a few, advice words, whatever you want to share to the Muslim public as we broadcast this on Galaxy 19 and into homes.
Okay, I'll jump in, Robert. So I think that there's we have the power to make this change, to require our government to not buy their way around the Fourth Amendment. And so I think there's two things that I just want to bring up. There's Congress. We need to get them to pass a law to prevent it. But then there's also state governments and local governments, because our state and local police are doing this exact same thing. And so we have kind of a whole bunch of work that we need to do on all different levels of government. I know that there's a law that advocates are trying to get passed in New York State that would prevent agencies within the state of New York from purchasing data. I would invite people to do two things. Visit our website, which is rightsanddissent.org. We also have a podcast that talks about the long history of FBI spying on activists and I guess minority communities, including the Muslim community, and that's at stillspying.org. And I think that's a great way to kind of educate yourself about this long history.
Thank you so much.
CARE internally every day, we just remind each other not to become desensitized. Every time, Trump makes an attack against Ilhan Omar or refugees in Minnesota, we condemn it. We don't say, well, he's done that twice before, we condemn it again. So as a community, we just have to not be desensitized, not accept government surveillance, continue to look for avenues for where we can sue the government where our rights have been violated, and to create new laws when these things are happening because there was no legal recourse. And so it's a long-term fight. The civil rights movement never ended. It's been going on for over 100 years. And we're a part of that. And so don't relent. And every year is another opportunity. CARE is going to look at its 117th congressional agenda. It's planned 100 days of recommendations for the Biden administration. These have to make it in there. We need to keep on working on these issues and the many more. And this struggle is not going to stop. So just keep on working with Sue. Keep on joining CARE. Keep on fighting. Just don't become desensitized. Let this light a little fire in your belly and keep on going.
Exactly. I think this is the perfect. I'm grateful to Vice. This was a perfect article to get us all fired up again, because I was here, right after the announcement that Biden had won. I felt like there was sort of like, 4 years, let's take a break, relax. No, get back to work.
Yeah.
Everybody, perhaps enjoy Thanksgiving with your immediate family, and then get right back to work. This is, thank you so much for both of you for being here. I'm grateful for Muslim Network TV for giving me this platform where I can have these very candid and frank discussions that many of us don't get to have on mainstream media. We'll get little clips, and your words will be twisted. And here, this is unedited. It'll go right as it is. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And we'll be sharing your alerts out, and keep us in the loop. And sounds good. Thank you so much. And to the rest of you, you all know, you have seen what unchecked governments can do around the world. We cover this many, many times when we're covering Burma, and we're covering Kashmir, and we're covering the rest of these countries that have authoritarian governments. And sometimes we forget that those same forces can be at work here too. So like I always say, get to work and join us in this fight for justice, equity, and fairness. Assalamu alaikum.